Welcome to Monk's Moon Temple. For thousands of years, Zen masters have understood that nature is our greatest teacher. The river, the mountain, the clouds passing overhead. Each element of the natural world holds secrets about how to live with profound peace and ease. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. Tonight, we will journey with a young monk at a mountain monastery. When he faces challenges, his teacher does not offer complicated answers. Instead, the master invites him outside to observe nature. In watching the natural world, Ren begins to understand truths about his own mind, truths that bring him great peace. These are not lessons to memorize or techniques to practice. They are invitations to see what has always been present. Simply listen, and let these teachings settle into your awareness like rain soaking into earth. Relax, take a slow, deep breath, and let's begin. The morning bell had not yet rung when Ren sat up in his simple bed. Another day ahead, another day of trying to make things work, of plans that needed to succeed, of situations demanding constant attention. For weeks now, he had been struggling. A difficult project at the monastery had fallen behind schedule. Personal relationships felt strained. Even his meditation practice seemed like another task to accomplish correctly. Every day felt like swimming upstream, exhausting and endless. Ren dressed and walked through the quiet monastery grounds, hoping to find the master before the day's activities began. The air was cool and fresh, touched with morning mist. Birds were just beginning their first songs. The master sat on a wooden bench near the meditation hall, watching the sky lighten. Ren approached and bowed. "Teacher, I need guidance. Everything feels difficult. No matter how hard I try, how much effort I put in, things don't seem to work out the way they should. I plan carefully. I work diligently, but obstacles keep appearing. I feel like I'm fighting against everything, and I'm tired." The master looked at Ren with gentle eyes. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." They walked together along a stone path that wound down through the monastery gardens. The path followed the sound of running water, growing louder as they descended. Soon they emerged at the bank of the river that flowed through the monastery grounds. The river was not large, perhaps 15 feet across at this point, but it moved with steady purpose. The water was clear enough to see smooth stones on the bottom. Morning light caught the surface, creating patterns of shimmer and shadow. The master sat on a flat rock near the water's edge and gestured for Ren to sit beside him. For several minutes, they simply watched the river flow. "Tell me," the master said quietly. "Where is the river trying to go?" Ren looked at the water, confused by the question. "Down the mountain, I suppose. To the valley below. Eventually to the sea. And does it seem to be struggling, fighting, forcing its way?" Ren watched more carefully. The water moved steadily downstream, curving around rocks, splitting around larger obstacles, rejoining itself on the other side. Where the riverbed narrowed, the water moved faster. Where it widened, the water slowed and spread. But always it continued forward. "No," Ren said slowly. "It doesn't seem to be struggling at all. It just flows. The master nodded. Watch what happens when the water meets a large stone. They observed as the current approached a boulder that rose partway out of the stream. The water did not stop when it met this obstacle. It did not try to push the stone out of the way. Instead, it simply divided, flowing around both sides of the rock, then coming together again downstream. The boulder remained unmoved, but the water continued its journey without interruption. The river does not fight the stone, the master said. It does not waste energy trying to force the stone to move. It accepts the stone as part of the landscape and finds a way to continue. The stone is not an obstacle to the river. It is simply part of the river's path. Ren felt something shift in his chest. But the river still gets where it's going. Yes, not by force, but by yielding. Water is soft and flexible. Yet over time it shapes even the hardest stone. The river you see today has been flowing here for thousands of years. Look at those stones. The master pointed to the smooth rounded rocks in the riverbed. Once they were sharp and angular. The water did not attack them or try to break them. It simply flowed over them day after day, year after year, and slowly, gently, the stones became smooth. They sat in silence, watching the water move. Ren noticed something else. Where there was a fallen branch lying partially across the stream, the water did not try to lift it or push it away. It simply flowed underneath it, around it, through the spaces between its smaller branches. The branch created a different pattern in the water. But it did not stop the flow. Everything you are struggling with, the master said, is like a stone or a branch in the river. Your difficult project, your relationships, your meditation practice. You are trying to remove the obstacles before you can proceed. But what if the obstacles are not problems to be solved before you can move forward? What if they are simply part of the landscape you are moving through? Ren thought about this. But I have responsibilities. I can't just give up on things that aren't working. The river does not give up, the master said. It flows without stopping. But it flows by finding the path of least resistance, not by creating more resistance. There is a difference between giving up and letting go of the struggle. The master stood and began walking slowly along the riverbank. Ren followed. After a few minutes, they came to a place where the river made a wide curve, bending almost back on itself before continuing downstream. Why do you think the river curves here? The master asked. Ren looked at the landscape. On the inside of the curve, the bank was made of soft soil and grass. On the outside of the curve, a wall of solid rock rose up from the water's edge. Because of the rock, Ren said. The river can't flow through solid stone, so it goes around. Exactly. The river does not waste time wondering why the rock is there or wishing the rock would move. It does not judge the rock as an obstacle that shouldn't exist. It simply accepts the reality of the rock and adjusts its path accordingly. This is wisdom. They continued walking until they reached a place where the river widened into a shallow pool before narrowing again and continuing downstream. The water in the pool was almost still, barely moving. Small fish swam in lazy circles. Dragonflies hovered over the surface. "Notice this pool," the master said. "The river has not stopped flowing, but here its movement is almost invisible. Sometimes the path requires speed and energy, like at the narrow places. Sometimes it requires patience and stillness, like here in the pool. The river does not judge one as better than the other. It simply responds to the landscape it encounters." Ren sat down on the bank again, watching the pool. "I think I'm beginning to understand. I've been treating every situation as if it requires maximum effort and force, like trying to push water uphill." The master smiled. "Yes. And how much energy does that require?" "All of it. I'm exhausted all the time. The water in this river will reach the sea. That is certain. But it will get there by flowing downward, by following gravity, by taking the path that opens before it. It does not reach the sea by fighting against the mountain." A story came to the master's mind, and they settled more comfortably on the riverbank as the morning sun rose higher, warming the stones. There was once a farmer who lived in a valley where a stream ran through his land. Every spring when the snow melted in the mountains, the stream would flood his fields. Year after year, the farmer would spend enormous effort trying to stop the flooding. He built walls and dikes. He dug channels to divert the water. He spent his whole spring fighting against the rising water, trying to force it to go somewhere else, anywhere else but across his fields. The battles left him exhausted and bitter. Despite all his work, the water always found a way through his barriers. His crops would be damaged. His time and energy would be wasted. Each year he would swear to build stronger walls, dig deeper channels, fight harder against the flood. One spring, the farmer injured his back badly and could not do the heavy work of building his usual defenses. He lay in his house listening to the water rise, expecting complete disaster. He imagined his fields destroyed, his year's work ruined. But when he was finally able to walk outside, he discovered something surprising. Yes, his fields were flooded, but the water had deposited rich, dark soil across the entire area. When the flood finally receded, the farmer planted his seeds in this new soil. That year, his harvest was more abundant than any he had ever grown. The farmer sat on his porch that autumn, looking at his full storehouses, and realized what the water had been trying to tell him all along. The flood was not his enemy. It was bringing him exactly what he needed. But he had been too busy fighting it to receive the gift. The next spring, when the water began to rise, the farmer did not build walls. Instead, he cleared channels that guided the water gently across his fields, letting it spread its gift of soil evenly, then drain away naturally when the time came. He worked with the water instead of against it. His harvests became legendary in the region. All because he learned to flow with what was already flowing instead of exhausting himself fighting against it. The master paused, letting the story settle. But the farmer learned something even deeper than this, he continued. He realized that his years of fighting had taught him something valuable. He knew the water's patterns now. He understood its strength and timing. When he finally stopped fighting, he was able to work with the water skillfully, not as someone who had given up, but as someone who had learned to dance with a powerful partner. This is important to understand. The river's teaching is not about becoming passive or indifferent. It is about learning to recognize what can be changed and what cannot, and responding wisely to both. The farmer could not change the spring floods, but he could change his relationship to them. And in that change of relationship, everything transformed. Ren listened to this story, feeling its truth settle into his bones. The farmer was me. I'm the one building walls against the natural flow of things. The master nodded. We all do this. We think we know better than the river how things should flow. We think our plans are wiser than the wisdom of water finding its level. But the river has been flowing for millions of years. It knows something we don't. They sat together as the sun climbed higher, watching the endless movement of water. Ren began to see it differently now, not as a struggle, but as a dance. The water responding to every surface it touched, adjusting constantly, flowing without hesitation through whatever landscape appeared. What does this mean for my project? Ren asked. For my relationships, for my practice. The master picked up a small twig and tossed it into the current. They watched it float downstream, spinning slowly, following the water's path without resistance. It means asking different questions. Instead of, how can I force this to work, you might ask, what is the natural flow here? Instead of, what obstacle must I remove, you might ask, what path opens when I accept this obstacle as part of the landscape? The master turned to look directly at Ren. You are not wrong to care about your work or your relationships. The river cares about reaching the sea. But it reaches the sea by following its nature, not by fighting against it. Your nature is not to be a rigid wall that never bends. Your nature is more like water than stone. Ren felt tears rising, a release of the enormous tension he had been carrying. I've been so tired. Of course. Fighting against the current is exhausting. But flowing with it is effortless. The master stood and offered a hand to help Ren up. Let's walk back slowly. And as we walk, notice how your own body moves. You don't have to force each step. Your body knows how to walk. You simply allow the movement to happen. This is also the way of water. As they climbed the path back toward the monastery, Ren became aware of his breathing, his footsteps, the way his arms swung naturally with each stride. None of it required force or struggle. The body knew how to move when the mind stopped trying to control every detail. The meditation you've been struggling with, the master said as they walked. You're trying to force your mind to be still. But stillness, like water's movement, is natural when you stop fighting against the currents that are already there. You don't create stillness. You allow it by not creating turbulence. They reached the monastery courtyard and paused. Ren bowed deeply to the master. Thank you. I feel like I've been holding my breath for months, and I can finally exhale. The master smiled. The river taught you, not me. I just suggested you look. The teaching was always there, flowing past you every day. This is how wisdom works. It's not hidden in complicated techniques or difficult practices. It's right in front of us in the simplest things. Water flowing, breath moving in and out, the natural rhythm of things when we stop imposing our will upon them. As Ren walked toward his duties for the day, he felt different. Not because his circumstances had changed, but because his relationship to those circumstances had shifted. The obstacles were still there. The project was still difficult. The relationship still needed attention. But now there was a possibility of moving through these things the way water moves through a landscape, by flowing rather than forcing, by yielding rather than resisting, by trusting the natural path that opens when we stop fighting against what is. Take a gentle breath. Now feel the air entering your body without effort. You are not pulling the air in by force. You are simply allowing the breath to flow the way the river flows, the way all natural things flow when we don't obstruct them with struggle. Notice any places in your life where you might be building walls against the natural current. Not to judge yourself for this, but simply to notice. What might it feel like to remove one stone from that wall, to let the water find its path? The wisdom of the river is simple but profound. It teaches us that the shortest path between 2 points is not always a straight line forced through obstacles. Sometimes the shortest path is the one that curves around resistance, that flows with the landscape rather than against it, that arrives at its destination not through force but through patience and flexibility. Water, the softest substance in the world, ultimately wears away the hardest stone. Not through violence, but through persistence. Not through force, but through gentle, constant presence. This is the way of deep change. This is the way of lasting transformation. Later that same day, as afternoon light slanted through the meditation hall windows, Ren sat in meditation. Usually, his mind would immediately begin planning, worrying, reviewing everything that needed to be done. But today, something was different. When a thought appeared, he noticed it. Just as the river notices a stone. The thought was there, part of the landscape. But Ren found he did not need to fight it or force it away. He simply let his awareness flow around it the way water flows around an obstacle. The thought remained, but it did not stop the deeper current of his attention. Another thought came, then another. Usually this would frustrate him. He would judge himself for his wandering mind, for his inability to maintain perfect focus. But today he remembered the river. The water doesn't stop flowing just because there are many stones. It continues, adjusting to each one, finding its way through whatever landscape appears. His breathing deepened naturally, not because he was forcing it, but because he had stopped fighting against the natural rhythm. His body knew how to breathe when his mind stopped trying to control it so tightly. After meditation, Ren went to work on the project that had been troubling him for weeks. The same difficulties were there, the same obstacles, but he approached them differently now. Instead of trying to force a solution, he looked for the natural path. Where was the resistance? Where was the opening? He noticed something he hadn't seen before. He had been so focused on making his original plan work that he hadn't noticed the simpler approach that was right in front of him. It was like the river's curve around the rock wall. The direct path was blocked. But there was another way, not worse, just different, perhaps even better. That evening, Ren returned to the river. The master was there, sitting on the same flat rock where they had sat that morning. "How was your day?" the master asked. Ren sat down beside him. "Different. I kept seeing the river in everything. My meditation, my work, even conversations with the other monks. Everywhere I looked, I could see places where I was trying to force things instead of allowing them to flow." The master nodded, watching the water move in the fading light. "This is good. You are beginning to see with different eyes. But remember, this is not about becoming passive. The river is not passive. It is constantly moving, constantly working, constantly finding its way. But it works with its nature, not against it." "I noticed something else," Ren said. "When I stopped fighting so hard, I actually had more energy. The tasks didn't become easier, but I became less tired doing them." Yes. Force requires enormous energy. Flow requires very little. This is why water can travel thousands of miles from mountain to sea. Not through effort, but through following the path that opens naturally. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the sound of the river. The same water that had flowed past this spot in the morning was long gone, somewhere far downstream. And yet the river remained, constant in its change. Always here and always new. "Teacher," Ren said, "I think I finally understand what you meant this morning. The river doesn't try to be anything other than water. It doesn't compare itself to other rivers or wish it could be a mountain instead. It simply is what it is, and that's enough." The master smiled. "And what are you, Ren?" Ren thought about this. "I'm not sure yet. But I think I'm learning that I don't have to force myself to be something I'm not. I can be myself and still accomplish what needs to be accomplished. Maybe even accomplish it better." "The river knows what it is," the master said. "It knows its nature is to flow downward, to seek the lowest place, to yield and adapt. When you know your own nature just as clearly, you too will flow with this kind of ease." The master paused, watching the river in the dim light. "There is an old saying, water seeks the lowest place, and yet nothing is more powerful. This is because it does not compete. It does not try to be higher than other things. It simply goes where it is naturally drawn, and in doing so, it nourishes everything it touches." Ren looked at the water, barely visible now in the twilight. "I've been trying to be the highest place, the best, the most accomplished, and it's exhausting because I'm always comparing, always competing, always trying to prove something." "Yes. And what does the river prove? Nothing. It just is." "Exactly. The river does not need to prove it is water. It does not need to convince anyone of its worth. It simply fulfills its nature, and that is enough. More than enough. Essential." They sat quietly for a moment. Then Ren asked, "How do I find my nature?" "The river has gravity to guide it." "What guides me?" The master considered this. "You have been guided all along, but you have been too busy forcing and controlling to feel it. When you stop trying so hard to be what you think you should be, what remains? When you stop pushing against everything, what naturally emerges? That is your nature calling to you. It sounds so simple when you say it. It is simple. But simple is not the same as easy. The river makes it look effortless. But water has practiced being water for billions of years. You are learning to be yourself. It takes time. It takes patience. Most of all, it takes stopping the constant effort to be something else. Ren nodded slowly. Today, when I stopped trying so hard, I noticed things I had missed before. Solutions I couldn't see when I was too busy forcing my original plan to work. This is the gift of flow. When you are not rigidly attached to one path, you can see the many paths that are actually available. The river teaches this perfectly. It never has just one route. If this way is blocked, there is always another way. The water does not panic when it meets an obstacle. It simply explores until it finds an opening. The stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, another monk rang the evening bell. Tomorrow, the master said, the river will still be here. You can return whenever you need to remember this teaching. But try also to see the river in other places. In your breath, which flows without your command. In conversations, which move best when you don't force them. In your meditation, where thoughts flow through like water through a streambed. Once you truly see how the river moves, you begin to see this movement everywhere. As darkness settled over the monastery, Ren walked back to his room. The sound of the river followed him, a constant reminder of what he had learned. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles, new opportunities to practice this wisdom. But tonight, he felt at peace. Not because everything was solved, but because he had discovered a new way of being with the unsolved. Rest in this knowing. Trust the flow that carries you, just as the river trusts gravity to carry it home. The monastery was busier than usual. A group of visiting monks had arrived from another temple, bringing new schedules and additional ceremonies. The daily rhythm that Ren had grown accustomed to kept shifting. Morning meditation happened at a different time. Meals were more crowded. New faces appeared everywhere, each with their own way of doing things. On top of this, Ren had received word that his family's situation back home was changing. His father was considering selling the family land. His younger sister was moving to a distant city. Nothing felt stable anymore. Even the weather seemed erratic, swinging between warm sunshine and sudden mountain storms. Ren found himself constantly adjusting, constantly adapting to the next change. By the third day, he felt stretched thin, like he was being pulled in too many directions at once. His mind jumped from one thing to the next. He couldn't seem to find his center. After the morning meal, Ren sought out the master. He found him in the small garden behind the kitchen, pulling weeds from between the stones. Teacher, everything keeps changing. Just when I get used to one thing, something else shifts. The monastery schedule, my family back home, even my own thoughts seem to move too fast. I feel like I'm being tossed around by waves. How can I find peace when nothing stays the same? The master stood slowly, brushing dirt from his hands. He looked past Ren toward the peaks that rose beyond the monastery walls. Come with me. Let's walk. They left the monastery grounds through the north gate and followed a path that climbed steadily upward. The morning air was cool and clear. Pine trees lined the trail, their needles soft underfoot. As they walked, the sounds of the monastery faded behind them. After about 20 minutes, they emerged onto an open ridge. Here, the view opened wide. The monastery sat below them, looking small and contained. And beyond everything, rising up against the sky, stood the mountain. It was not the tallest peak in the range, but it dominated the landscape. Its slopes were covered with forest near the base, giving way to bare rock higher up, and finally a crown of snow that never fully melted, even in summer. The mountain caught the morning light, solid and present. The master led Ren to a flat boulder at the edge of the ridge, and they sat down together. For a long time, they simply looked at the mountain in silence. "How long has this mountain been here?" the master finally asked. Ren considered this. "Thousands of years. Maybe millions. And in all that time, what has changed around it?" Ren looked at the landscape. "Everything, I suppose. The trees grow and die. The seasons change. Storms come and go. Animals and people live their lives and pass away. Yes. And the mountain? It remains." The master nodded. "The mountain does not try to remain. It simply is. Watch it now. See how clouds move across its face." As they sat, Ren noticed thin wisps of cloud drifting past the peak. The clouds moved quickly in the high wind, forming and dissolving, changing shape constantly. But the mountain behind them stayed exactly where it was. "The clouds are like your thoughts," the master said. "Like your worries about the changing schedule, your concerns about your family, your feelings about the visiting monks. They move through quickly, taking different forms, appearing and disappearing. But notice, the mountain does not move with the clouds. It does not chase them when they drift away, does not push them back when they arrive. It simply allows them to pass." Ren watched more carefully now. A larger cloud bank approached from the west, moving steadily toward the mountain. As it reached the peak, the mountain seemed to disappear entirely, swallowed by white mist. For several minutes, the summit was completely hidden. "It's gone," Ren said. "Is it?" the master asked. "Or is it simply obscured?" As they watched, the cloud mass continued moving east. Gradually, the peak began to emerge again. First the snow-covered summit, then the rocky slopes below, until the entire mountain stood clear once more, exactly as it had been before. "The mountain was always there," Ren said slowly. "The cloud just covered it temporarily." "Yes. And this is important to understand. When your life feels chaotic, when changes come rapidly one after another, it may seem like your center has been lost. But like the mountain in the cloud, your center has not actually gone anywhere. It has only been temporarily obscured by the weather passing through." The master picked up a small stone from the ground and held it in his palm. "You are not the changing circumstances. You are not the schedule shifts or the family news or the visiting monks. Those are weather patterns moving through. You are the mountain that remains while the weather passes. Ren felt something settle in his chest as he listened. But how do I find the mountain in myself when the clouds are so thick I can't see anything clearly? By remembering that the mountain does not need to do anything to remain steady. It does not brace itself against storms. It does not resist the clouds. It simply stands in its own nature, and the weather moves through without changing what it fundamentally is. A story came to the master then, and he settled more comfortably on the boulder. There was once a great tree that grew at the base of a mountain. The tree was tall and strong with deep roots and thick branches. It had grown there for over 200 years, watching the world change around it. Every spring, new leaves would emerge on the tree's branches, bright green and tender, full of life. The tree would feel the surge of energy as sap rose through its trunk, as birds built nests among its branches. Everything quickened with new growth. Then summer would come with its long, hot days. The tree's leaves would darken and toughen, providing shade for animals sheltering from the heat. The tree would stretch toward the sun, its roots drinking deep from underground streams. Autumn brought transformation. The leaves would turn brilliant colors, then fall one by one. The tree would feel itself being stripped bare, its energy drawing inward, its life force returning to the roots. Birds would leave for warmer places. The air would grow cold. Winter was the hardest season. The tree stood naked against freezing winds. Snow weighted its bare branches. Ice formed on its bark. From the outside, it looked almost dead, dark and stripped and waiting. Year after year, the tree went through these cycles. 200 times it bloomed and shed its leaves. 200 winters it stood bare. And through all of this, the tree never forgot what it was. It never panicked in autumn, fearing it was dying. It never worried in winter that spring would not return. It simply stood rooted deeply, trusting its own nature. One spring, a young sapling grew near the old tree's base. The sapling loved its first spring, delighting in its new leaves, in the warmth and birdsong and abundance. But when autumn came, the young tree became afraid. "What's happening to me?" the sapling cried as its leaves began to change color. "I'm losing my leaves. Something is wrong." The old tree spoke gently to the young one. "Nothing is wrong. This is simply autumn. Your leaves have served their purpose, and now it is time to let them go. But I'll be naked, exposed. How will I survive without my leaves? The same way I have survived 200 winters," the old tree said. "By remembering that you are not your leaves. You are the trunk, the branches, the roots that go deep. The leaves come and go with the seasons, but you remain." The young sapling was not convinced. All through autumn, it worried. When winter came and the last leaf fell, it was certain it would not survive. The cold winds terrified it. The ice felt like death itself. But the old tree stood beside it, steady as always. "Feel your roots," it said to the young tree. "Go deep inside yourself, below all the surface changes. There you will find something that does not change with the seasons. There you will find what you truly are." The young tree, having no other choice, turned its attention inward, down through its trunk, down into its roots that reached deep into the earth. And there it found something surprising, a steadiness, a core of life that was not affected by the bare branches or the freezing wind, a presence that simply was, regardless of what season moved across the surface. Winter passed. Spring returned as it always does. New leaves emerged on both trees. The young sapling had survived its first winter, and in doing so, had learned something essential. It was not the leaves or the flowers or the outward appearance of any season. It was the deep-rooted presence that remained through all changes. "Now you understand," the old tree said. "We are both like the mountain. The seasons move across us, but they do not change what we are. Growth and loss, abundance and bareness, warmth and cold, these are weather patterns. They come and they go, but the mountain remains." Ren sat quietly after the story, looking at the mountain. He could see now what the master meant. The peak stood exactly as it had stood for countless years, while around it everything had changed. Empires had risen and fallen. Forests had grown and burned. Storms had raged and cleared. And through it all, the mountain remained itself. "I think I understand," Ren said. "I've been thinking of myself as the weather. When the schedule changes, I think I am that change. When my family situation shifts, I think I am that situation. But I'm not the weather patterns. I'm the mountain they're moving across." Yes. And this understanding changes everything. When you know you are the mountain, you can allow the weather to pass without being disturbed by it. The clouds come and you watch them. The storms arrive and you stand steady. The seasons change and you remain rooted in your own nature. The master stood and began walking along the ridge. Ren followed. They came to a place where they could see the monastery below. From this height, Ren could see people moving about their tasks, small figures going from building to building. He could see the visiting monks group gathered in the courtyard. All the busyness that had felt so overwhelming earlier now looked small and temporary. From up here it all looks different, Ren observed. "This is another gift the mountain offers," the master said. Perspective. When you are in the middle of the storm, everything feels huge and overwhelming. But when you rise to the mountain's view, you see how small and temporary each storm actually is. The changes that feel so huge in the moment are just weather passing through. They turned back toward the mountain. The sun had climbed higher now, and the light had changed. The snow on the peak glowed brilliant white. Shadows had shifted on the slopes, but the mountain itself was unchanged. "Tomorrow," the master said, "the light will be different again. Next week, different clouds will pass. Next month, the season will begin to shift. And the mountain will remain, reflecting each change without being changed by it." They sat again, watching birds circle below them on the thermal currents. Ren felt his breathing slow, felt his mind grow more spacious. The urgency he had felt earlier, the sense of being pulled in too many directions, was still there. But now there was something else, too, a stillness underneath the movement, a presence that was not disturbed by the surface changes. "Teacher, how do I practice this?" How do I become more like the mountain? The master considered this. You do not become the mountain. You recognize that you already are. But there are ways to remember this truth more easily. He pointed to the peak. Each morning when you wake, before you enter the day's activities, remember the mountain. Not by thinking about it, but by feeling into that quality of steadiness. Let your breath settle. Feel your body's weight on the earth. Notice the part of you that simply observes, the part that remains present while thoughts and feelings move through. In your meditation, when the mind becomes busy with thoughts, don't fight them. Let them move like clouds across the mountain's face. Your job is not to clear the sky. Your job is to remain as the mountain, letting the sky be whatever it is. During the day, when you feel overwhelmed by changes, pause for just a moment. Feel your feet on the ground. Remember that you are not the changing situation. You are the awareness within which the situation is happening. Like the mountain, like the old tree's roots, there is something in you that goes deeper than surface changes. Ren nodded slowly, taking this in. It sounds simple. It is simple. But like all simple truths, it must be remembered again and again. The clouds will be convincing. The storms will feel real and threatening. In those moments, you will forget that you are the mountain. But then you will remember. And each time you remember, the knowing becomes stronger. They began the walk back down toward the monastery. As they descended, Ren noticed how the mountain gradually disappeared from view, hidden by trees and the monastery's buildings. But he knew it was still there, steady and unchanging even when he couldn't see it. This felt important somehow. The mountain didn't need his awareness to remain steady. It stood in its own nature whether anyone was watching or not. Perhaps that was true of his own center as well. Perhaps it remained steady even when he forgot about it, waiting for him to remember. Halfway down the path, the master paused and looked back toward where the mountain had been visible. There is something else the mountain teaches. Come here tomorrow at sunset. The teaching will be different then. The next evening, Ren made his way back up the trail as the sun began to sink toward the western peaks. The light had changed completely. What had been bright and clear in the morning was now bathed in golden light, long shadows stretching across the landscape. The master was already there, sitting on the same boulder. Ren joined him, and together they watched the light change. The mountain looked completely different now. The east-facing slopes were already in shadow, deep blue and purple. But the western face glowed orange and gold, the snow on the summit catching the last direct sunlight and seeming to burn with inner fire. Is this the same mountain we saw yesterday morning? The master asked. Yes, but it looks so different. The mountain has not changed. Only the light falling upon it has changed. This is another important teaching. The mountain reflects each condition without being that condition. In morning light, it appears one way. In evening light, another. In storm, it becomes dark and menacing. In clear weather, it seems peaceful and benign. But these are only appearances, reflections of the conditions around it. The mountain itself remains what it is. As they watched, the light continued to change. The golden glow climbed higher up the peak as the sun sank lower. The shadowed areas grew darker. Clouds near the horizon caught fire with red and orange. The whole scene transformed minute by minute. "Your moods are like this light," the master said. "Sometimes you feel happy, and your world seems bright and beautiful. Sometimes you feel sad, and everything appears dark. Sometimes anger colors everything red. Sometimes peace makes everything seem soft and gentle. But these are just the light of temporary conditions falling upon the mountain of your being. They change the appearance but not the reality." Ren watched the last sunlight leave the mountain's peak. For a moment the summit glowed even brighter, a last flash before the shadow claimed it. Then the whole mountain stood in twilight, solid and dark against the fading sky. "Even now in darkness, the mountain is still there," the master said. "When you feel lost or confused, when your mood is dark and you cannot see clearly, remember this. The mountain does not disappear in darkness. It only appears to. It stands steady, waiting for the light to return, as it always does." Stars began to appear in the deepening blue above. The air grew cooler. They sat in silence as night settled over the landscape. "The mountain teaches us through all conditions," the master said softly. "In morning brightness and evening shadow, in summer's warmth and winter's cold, in storm and calm. Always teaching the same truth, I remain myself through all changes. This is the stability we seek. Not a stability that requires perfect conditions, but a stability that exists through all conditions." Ren returned to his room that night with a fuller understanding. He had seen the mountain in different lights, had watched it remain itself through changing appearances. Now he could begin to see his own life the same way. The difficulties he faced were like the changing light. They colored his experience, changed how things appeared, but they did not change what he fundamentally was. The visiting monks, the schedule changes, his family situation, these were conditions, not his core identity. Over the following days, Ren found himself returning to the mountain teaching again and again. When a visiting monk criticized his meditation posture, Ren felt the sting of it, the defensive anger rising. But then he remembered, this is just weather passing through. The mountain does not argue with storms. When news came that his father had indeed sold the family land, Ren felt a wave of grief and loss. But underneath that grief, he could feel something that remained steady. The mountain does not resist the seasons. When an unexpected change in the schedule disrupted his carefully planned day, he noticed the irritation arise. But he also noticed the part of him that simply observed the irritation, the way the mountain watches clouds pass without becoming the clouds. It wasn't that the challenges became easier or the changes less disruptive, but his relationship to them shifted. Instead of being tossed around by each new condition, he began to find the place in himself that could stand steady while the weather moved through. One morning, after a particularly difficult meditation where his mind had been extremely busy, Ren walked outside to find a storm rolling in. Dark clouds gathered over the mountains. Wind picked up, bending the trees. The first drops of rain began to fall. He looked toward the north, where the mountain stood. Now hidden completely by the storm clouds. He couldn't see it at all, but he knew it was there, receiving the rain, standing in the wind, unchanged by the weather that temporarily obscured it. The knowing felt like a physical presence in his chest, a recognition that beneath all the surface turbulence of his thoughts and emotions, something remained steadfast. Not because he was trying to hold it steady, but because steadiness was its nature. The way mountains stand steady not through effort, but through being what they are. As they entered the monastery grounds, the busyness greeted them immediately. The visiting monks were preparing for an afternoon ceremony. People were calling to each other, moving equipment, rearranging the meditation hall. All the activity that had felt so disturbing this morning was still happening. But Ren found he could walk through it differently. Not fighting against it, not being swept up in it, but moving through it like the mountain stands while clouds pass. He could participate fully while remaining rooted in that deeper stillness. That evening, Ren sat in meditation. His mind was still busy. Thoughts about the day's events, concerns about tomorrow, memories of the past. The clouds were thick. But now, instead of fighting them or being carried away by them, he tried to find the mountain within himself. At first it was difficult. The thoughts seemed so solid, so demanding of attention. But gradually he began to notice something else, a quality of awareness that was watching the thoughts without being the thoughts, a presence that remained steady while the mental weather moved through. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes he forgot and got caught up in the thought clouds again. But each time he remembered, it became a little easier. Like the mountain emerging from the mist, his center would become clear for a moment before the next cloud arrived. After meditation, Ren walked outside into the evening air. The monastery compound was quieter now, most monks preparing for sleep. He looked toward the north where he knew the mountain stood, invisible now in the darkness. Tomorrow it would still be there. The visiting monks would still be here. The schedule would still be different. His family situation would still be uncertain. The weather would continue passing through. But underneath it all, there was something that did not change, something as steady as the mountain, as rooted as the old tree, as present as the earth beneath his feet. He didn't need to create this steadiness. It was already there. He only needed to remember it, to return to it, to trust it the way the tree trusted that spring would come again after winter. Trust in this deeper stability. It does not depend on circumstances staying the same. It does not require controlling everything around you. It is simply what you are beneath all the surface movements. The mountain within, steady and unshakable, waiting for you to remember it is there. The visiting monks had departed, and the monastery had returned to its usual rhythm. Ren noticed he moved through the changing schedules more easily now, like water finding its path. When unexpected tasks arose, he could feel the mountain-like steadiness underneath his responses. The teachings were beginning to take root. But a new challenge had emerged. One of the elder monks had begun criticizing Ren's work in the garden. His rows weren't straight enough. His pruning technique was incorrect. His understanding of the traditional methods was lacking. Each day brought new corrections, new observations about what Ren was doing wrong. At first, Ren tried to flow with this like water, to remain steady like the mountain. But something else was happening. He found himself becoming preoccupied with how he appeared to others. During meditation, instead of simply sitting, he would wonder if his posture looked correct. While working, he would constantly check if anyone was watching, judging. He began performing his duties not from natural presence, but from a place of worry about how he was being perceived. Even worse, he noticed himself creating a careful image. With some monks, he emphasized his diligence. With others, his spiritual insight. He caught himself changing his manner of speaking depending on who was listening, crafting his responses to sound wise or humble or dedicated, whatever seemed most appropriate to the moment. It was exhausting, and beneath the exhaustion was a deeper unease. Who was he really? If he kept adjusting his presentation depending on his audience, where was his true self in all of this? He felt like he was losing touch with something essential, something real beneath all the performance. One evening after meditation, as the other monks filed out of the hall, Ren remained sitting. The master, who always sat near the back, approached him. "You look troubled." Ren hesitated, then spoke. "Teacher, I don't know who I am anymore. I've become so concerned with how others see me that I've lost track of what's actually true. With the elder monk's criticism, I find myself constantly trying to appear a certain way. And now I do this with everyone. I adjust myself to fit what I think they want to see. But which version is real? Or am I just a collection of performances?" The master sat down beside him. "Come with me. The moon is full tonight." They walked out into the night air. The monastery was quiet, most monks already in their rooms. The master led Ren down a path to a small pond at the edge of the grounds. It was a place used for collecting water, perhaps 20 feet across, surrounded by smooth stones and a few willow trees. The moon hung large and bright in the clear sky, nearly full. Its light illuminated everything with soft silver. And there, on the surface of the still pond, the moon appeared again, perfect and round, floating on the water. The master and Ren sat on the stones at the pond's edge. For a long time, they simply looked at the two moons, one in the sky, one in the water. "Tell me," the master said quietly, "which moon is real?" Ren looked at both. "The one in the sky. The one in the water is just a reflection." "Yes. And if you wanted to touch the moon, where would you reach?" "Toward the sky, not the water." The master nodded. "And yet, see how perfect the reflection appears." If someone who had never seen the real moon looked only at this pond, they might believe this reflection was the moon itself. It has the same shape, the same brightness, the same beauty. But what happens if I do this? The master picked up a small pebble and tossed it gently into the pond. Ripples spread across the surface. The reflected moon shattered into pieces, fragments of light dancing and reforming as the water moved. For several moments, there was no moon in the pond at all, just scattered pieces of brightness. But the moon in the sky remained perfectly whole, undisturbed by the ripples in the water below. As the water gradually stilled, the reflection came back together, reforming piece by piece until the moon floated whole on the surface once more. "The reflection is not the moon," the master said. "It is an image created by conditions. Still water, clear sky, the moon's position. Change any condition, and the reflection changes or disappears. But the real moon is unaffected by any of this. Ren watched the pond settle back to stillness. You're saying the way others see me is like the reflection, and my real self is like the moon in the sky. Yes, but there is more to understand. Look carefully. Which moon are you most concerned with? Ren thought about his worry over the elder monk's criticism, his constant adjusting of his presentation, his anxiety about how he appeared. I've been obsessed with the reflection, with how I appear on the surface of other people's perceptions. And what happens when you spend all your energy trying to control the reflection? I lose touch with what's real. I forget about the actual moon while I'm trying to manage how the moon appears in the water. The master picked up another pebble. Watch what happens when you try to control the reflection. He tossed the pebble into the pond. Again, ripples spread. Again, the moon's reflection shattered and scattered. The master immediately threw another pebble, then another. Each one created new waves, new disturbance. The reflected moon never had a chance to reform. It remained fragments, constantly breaking and reforming, but never stable, never whole. This is what happens when you try to control how others see you, the master said. You create ripples with your efforts, but these very efforts keep disturbing the water. The more you try to perfect the reflection, the more you disturb it. And meanwhile, you are not looking at the real moon at all. Ren felt something crack open in his chest. He had been working so hard to manage his image, to correct what the elder monk criticized, to appear wise and dedicated and humble. But all this effort was just creating more ripples, more disturbance. And in focusing on the reflection, he had forgotten to look up at what was real. They sat in silence as the pond gradually settled again. The moon's reflection reformed, clear and whole, without any effort from them at all. There is a story, the master said, about a musician who became famous throughout the land. She played the bamboo flute with such skill that people would travel for days to hear her perform. Her music could make people weep, could fill them with joy, could transport them to places beyond words. But as her fame grew, something began to change. She became aware of her audience's expectations. She noticed their reactions, their preferences, their opinions. Slowly, she began adjusting her playing to meet these expectations. When she sensed the audience wanted something uplifting, she played bright melodies. When she felt they wanted depth and sorrow, she played mournful tunes. She became very skilled at reading her audience and giving them what they wanted. Her fame grew even greater. People praised her sensitivity, her responsiveness, her ability to touch exactly what they were feeling. But the musician herself felt increasingly hollow. She no longer knew what she actually wanted to play. She had become so good at reflecting her audience's desires that she had lost touch with her own musical voice. Was she a great musician, or was she just a very accurate mirror? One night, after a particularly celebrated performance, she walked alone into the mountains. She sat by a stream holding her flute and realized she didn't know what to play. Every melody that came to mind seemed to be something she had played for someone else, adjusted for some audience, shaped by others' expectations. She sat there through the night, not playing, just listening to the stream. As dawn approached, a bird began to sing in a nearby tree. The bird's song was simple and pure, nothing fancy or complicated, but it was completely authentic. The bird was not singing to please anyone. It was simply singing its own nature. Something in the musician broke open. She lifted her flute to her lips and played a single note. Just one note, held long and steady. But it was her note, not anyone else's. It came from her true voice, not from any image of who she should be. From that note, a melody emerged. It was not the kind of music she had become famous for. It was simpler, more direct, sometimes rough. But it was true. It was the sound of her actual self, not the reflection of others' desires. When she returned to the city and played this new music, some people were disappointed. It wasn't what they expected from her. It didn't always please them in the familiar ways. But some people heard something deeper. They heard authenticity. They heard a real person playing real music, not a mirror reflecting their expectations. The musician learned that she could not be both the moon and its reflection. She could not be her true self and everyone's image of who she should be. She had to choose. And when she chose to be the moon, real and whole, even if misunderstood, she found a peace that all the praise for her reflections had never given her. Ren listened to this story, feeling its truth settle deep. He had been trying to be the reflection, the good student in the elder monk's eyes, the diligent worker in others' perception, the spiritually advanced practitioner for those who saw him that way. But in all this reflecting, he had lost touch with who he actually was. Teacher, I understand. But how do I find the real moon? How do I know what's truly me and what's just reflection? The master pointed up at the moon in the sky. The real moon doesn't try to be anything. It simply is. It doesn't adjust itself based on who's looking at it. It doesn't change its nature to meet expectations. It shines with its own light, and anyone who wishes to see it can look up and find it. But the elder monk's criticisms, are they all wrong? Should I ignore guidance from teachers? This is an important distinction. The moon accepts the light of the sun. It receives light from beyond itself and reflects it. This is natural and good. In the same way, you can receive teaching, can learn from others, can be shaped by wisdom. But receiving light is different from changing your essential nature to please someone. The moon receives sunlight but remains the moon. The master looked at Ren directly. When the elder monk offers true teaching, something in you recognizes it. It resonates with what you already know to be true. This is receiving light. But when you twist yourself into shapes to avoid criticism, when you perform rather than practice, when you are more concerned with appearing right than being genuine, this is trying to control the reflection. A breeze moved across the pond, creating small ripples. The moon's reflection wavered, broke apart slightly, then reformed as the water settled. The moon in the sky remained completely still. Notice how the reflection is constantly affected by conditions, the master said. A breeze, a pebble, even the movement of a fish beneath the surface, everything disturbs it. This is the nature of reflections, of images, of how we appear to others. It is inherently unstable, constantly changing based on conditions we cannot control. But the real moon, look at it. Wind does not move it. Clouds may hide it temporarily, but they do not change it. This is the stability of what is real versus what is merely appearance. Ren felt the teaching settling into his bones. All his anxiety about how he appeared, all his careful management of his image, all his adjusting and performing, this was trying to control something inherently unstable, like trying to smooth ripples in water while standing in the water himself. Each movement creating more disturbance. So I should stop caring what others think. No, that would be another form of control, another performance, the performance of not caring. The moon does not defiantly refuse to be reflected. It simply shines with its own light, and reflections happen naturally. You do not need to control how others see you, but neither do you need to control your not caring about how they see you. Simply be genuine, and let perceptions be what they are. The master stood and walked closer to the pond's edge. There is one more thing to understand. Come, look closely at the reflection. Ren joined him at the very edge of the water. They both looked down at the moon's reflection floating just below the surface. Imagine you are thirsty, the master said, and you think this reflected moon is water. What happens when you try to drink it? I would get water, but not the moon. The moon was never in the water to begin with. Yes. And this is the final teaching. The reflection is not just unstable and easily disturbed. It is also fundamentally empty of what it appears to be. People's perceptions of you are not you. Their opinions, their judgments, their praise or criticism, these are reflections, images, appearances. They may resemble you, but they are not you. They are created by the conditions of their own minds, their expectations, their histories, their needs. When the elder monk criticizes your work, he is looking at his reflection of you, created by his own standards and expectations and past experiences. It may resemble you, or it may not. But it is not you. When you try to fix yourself based on this reflection, you are trying to change the moon to match how it appears in one particular pond. Ren suddenly laughed. That's absurd. The moon can't change itself to match every reflection in every pond on Earth. Exactly. And yet this is what we try to do. We try to be different people for different audiences, to match each reflection, to control how we appear in each person's perception. It is not only exhausting, it is impossible. And in the attempt, we lose touch with what is real. They walked slowly back toward the monastery. The moon followed them overhead, constant and present. Ren felt something had loosened in him. Not solved completely, but loosened. He could feel the difference now between his genuine self and the performances he had been offering. Tomorrow, the master said, when you work in the garden and the elder monk comes to observe, try this. Do your work as genuinely as you can. Not performing being genuine, not trying to appear authentic, but actually doing the work from your real self. Let the elder monk see what he sees. His reflection is his own. You cannot control it, and you do not need to. But what if his criticism is valid? What if I really am doing something wrong? Then you will recognize it. Something true resonates with truth. When genuine teaching meets genuine presence, recognition happens. But this is different from scrambling to fix yourself based on every judgment and opinion. The moon receives light from the sun because that is its nature. But it does not scramble to reflect every passing cloud. They reached Ren's room. The master paused before leaving. Remember, the goal is not to become indifferent or hard. The moon is not hard. It is luminous and beautiful. It affects the tides, lights the night, inspires wonder. But it does this by being fully itself, not by trying to control how it appears. The next morning, Ren went to work in the garden. His heart was beating faster as he approached, knowing the elder monk often came to observe. He noticed the familiar anxiety rising, the urge to check his posture, to make sure he was doing everything correctly, to prepare explanations for his choices. But then he remembered the moon, the real moon, not the reflection. He knelt in the garden and simply began to work. Not performing work, not working to appear a certain way, but actually working. His hands in the soil, his attention on the plants, his body moving naturally as it knew how to move. When his mind started to worry about being watched, he noticed this was focusing on the reflection. He gently brought his attention back to the real, the actual work, the actual moment, his actual self engaged in what was in front of him. The elder monk did come and did offer criticism. Your spacing is still uneven. See how this section differs from that one? Ren looked where the elder monk pointed, and something interesting happened. Because he wasn't defending a performance, wasn't protecting an image, he could actually see what the elder monk was pointing at. Yes, the spacing was uneven. He had been distracted when planting that section, thinking about something else instead of paying attention. You're right, Ren said simply. I see it now. Thank you. The elder monk looked slightly surprised, as if he had been prepared for defensiveness or excuses. He nodded and moved on. Ren returned to his work and noticed something remarkable. He felt lighter. By acknowledging what was true without defending what wasn't, by being present with what was real rather than managing what was reflected, he had more energy, more clarity, more peace. Over the following days, Ren continued to practice this teaching. In conversations, he noticed when he started to perform, not to judge himself for it, but just to notice. And in noticing, he could sometimes choose differently, could speak from genuine presence rather than calculated presentation. It wasn't perfect. Old habits were strong. He would catch himself crafting his words to sound wise, adjusting his manner to appear humble, performing dedication rather than being dedicated. But each time he noticed, he could make a small correction, could come back to what was real. In meditation, this teaching opened something new. He had been so concerned with meditating correctly, with appearing to be a good practitioner. But now he could simply sit. Just this body, just this breath, just this moment, not performing meditation for an imagined audience, but actually being present. The thoughts still came, like ripples on water. But he understood now that these were reflections, appearances, not his true nature. His true nature was more like the moon itself. Present, aware, unchanging in its essence, even as appearances moved across its surface. One evening, about a week after the teaching at the pond, Ren returned to that spot alone. The moon was past full now, slightly less than round. He sat on the stones and looked at both moons, the real one in the sky, the reflected one in the water. A fish moved beneath the surface, and the reflection wavered. A breeze came, and the reflection broke into fragments. But Ren did not feel disturbed by this. The instability of the reflection no longer seemed like a problem to be solved. It was simply the nature of reflections. He looked up at the real moon, steady in the sky. Something in him recognized this steadiness, not as something he needed to create, but as what he already was beneath all the performances and adjustments and concerns about appearance. The moon did not become the moon by trying. It simply was the moon. And in being fully itself, it gave light to the world, affected the tides, inspired wonder, not by controlling how it appeared, but by shining with its own nature. Ren carried the lessons from the river, from the mountain, and now from the moon. He was learning to flow without forcing, to remain steady amid change, and to distinguish between his true nature and the countless reflections of how he appeared to others. These teachings were not separate. They wove together. The river had shown him how to move through obstacles without fighting. The mountain had shown him the steadiness beneath changing conditions. And now the moon showed him what was real versus what was merely appearance. He noticed that these teachings supported each other. When he remembered the mountain's steadiness, it was easier to not be disturbed by others' changing opinions. When he remembered the river's flow, he could move through social situations without forcing or performing. And now, understanding about reflections, he could participate fully in community life while remaining rooted in his genuine self. The monastery felt different now. Not because it had changed, but because his way of being in it had changed. He still worked diligently, still practiced meditation, still learned from teachers. But there was less strain, less performance, less exhausting effort to control things that were inherently beyond control. The elder monk still offered criticism, but Ren could receive what was useful without taking on what was merely the elder's reflection, his personal preferences and opinions. Some teachings resonated as true, and Ren learned from them. Others were just one person's view, and Ren could let them pass like clouds across the moon, not denying them, but not being defined by them either. Take a gentle breath now. Feel yourself present in this moment. Not how you appear, not how you imagine others see you, but your actual self here and now. The peace that comes from this is different from the peace of being praised or accepted or approved of. It is the peace of being real, of knowing that underneath all the changing reflections, something steady and genuine remains, something that doesn't need defending or perfecting or managing, something that simply is, like the moon in the sky, constant and luminous and free. Winter was approaching the mountain monastery. The air grew colder each day, and the first light snows had already dusted the higher peaks. With winter came harder work. Firewood needed to be split and stacked. Buildings required repairs before the heavy snows arrived. Food stores had to be organized and rationed carefully to last through the long months ahead. Ren had been assigned to work with the team preparing the monastery for winter. The work was physically demanding, and the elder monk overseeing the project had high standards. There was no room for weakness, no tolerance for fatigue. When someone struggled with a heavy load, the elder monk would say, "Be stronger." A monk must be like iron, unbending and unbreakable. Ren tried to meet this standard. He lifted loads that were too heavy. He worked past the point of exhaustion. When his muscles ached and his back protested, he pushed through, refusing to show any sign of struggle. Strength meant not yielding. Strength meant being hard and unyielding like iron. But after several weeks of this, Ren's body began to rebel. His back seized up one morning, a sharp pain that made him gasp. His shoulders were so tight he could barely lift his arms. His hands shook from gripping tools too hard for too long. He felt brittle, like something inside him was close to breaking. One afternoon, as he struggled to lift a heavy beam, his back spasmed again, and he had to put it down. The elder monk saw this and shook his head with disappointment. "You need to be stronger. A weak monk is useless when the real hardships of winter come." Ren stood there, breathing through the pain, feeling like a failure. He had been trying so hard to be strong, to be unbreakable, to never yield. But instead of becoming stronger, he felt more fragile than ever. That evening, Ren could barely sit for meditation. His body was too rigid, too painful. He tried to push through it, to ignore the discomfort, to be strong. But finally, he had to stand and leave the meditation hall early, something he had never done before. Outside, the master was walking through the garden in the fading light. He saw Ren moving stiffly, saw the pain in his posture. "Your body is speaking to you," the master said gently. "It's telling me I'm weak," Ren replied, his voice tight with frustration. "I need to be stronger. The elder monk says a monk must be like iron, unbending and unbreakable. But I keep bending. I keep feeling like I might break." The master was quiet for a moment, looking toward the eastern edge of the monastery grounds. "Come with me. There's something you should see. Can you walk?" Ren nodded, though each step sent pain through his back. They walked slowly through the grounds as dusk settled. The master led him to a grove of bamboo that grew near the monastery's eastern wall. The tall stalks rose up into the dimming sky, their leaves rustling softly in the evening breeze. "Sit here," the master said, gesturing to a flat stone near the bamboo grove. "Let's watch for a while." They sat in the growing darkness as the wind picked up. Ren watched the bamboo stalks move. The wind pushed against them, and they bent gracefully, swaying almost to the ground. But as soon as the wind eased, they sprang back upright, completely unharmed. Another gust came, stronger this time. The bamboo bent even further, the tops of some stalks nearly touching the earth. Ren could hear them creaking slightly, but they did not break. When the wind passed, they straightened again, resilient and whole. "Tell me," the master said, "is bamboo strong or weak?" Ren watched the stalks bending in the wind. "I'm not sure. It bends so easily. That seems weak. But it doesn't break. That seems strong. The elder monk tells you to be like iron, unbending and unbreakable. But have you ever seen what happens to iron in a strong enough storm? Ren thought about this. It can snap. If it's too rigid, it breaks under enough pressure. Yes. Iron is strong when the force is less than its rigidity. But when the force exceeds its capacity, it breaks completely. There is no middle ground for iron. It either holds or it shatters. The master gestured to the bamboo. But look at this. The bamboo bends with forces that would break iron. It yields. It bows. It touches the ground if it must. But then it returns. This is a different kind of strength. Not the strength of rigidity, but the strength of flexibility. A particularly strong gust swept through the grove. The bamboo stalks bent so far over they formed arches, their tops sweeping the ground. The sound was like rushing water. But when the wind passed, every stalk sprang back to vertical, undamaged, and whole. The bamboo is not pretending to be weak, the master continued. It is genuinely strong. Its strength is in its flexibility, in its willingness to bend. It survives storms that destroy trees with harder wood. It bends to the ground and rises again while the rigid oak cracks and falls. Ren felt something loosening inside him as he watched. He had been trying to be iron, rigid and unyielding. But his body was telling him that this kind of strength was breaking him, not building him. Teacher, are you saying I should be weak? Should I give up when things are hard? Is the bamboo giving up when it bends? Or is it responding wisely to the reality of the wind? There is a difference between yielding and giving up. The bamboo does not stop being bamboo when it bends. It does not surrender its nature. It simply adapts its form to meet the present conditions. The master reached out and touched one of the bamboo stalks. Feel this. Ren reached out and ran his hand along the smooth surface. It was hard and solid, as strong as wood. But when he pressed against it, it moved easily, bending away from his pressure, then straightening when he released it. The bamboo is both hard and flexible, the master said. This is not a contradiction. This is wisdom. It is strong in its core, but flexible in its structure. It has deep roots but moves with the wind. It stands upright but knows how to bow. Your body is trying to teach you this. When you hold yourself rigid, when you refuse to bend, when you push through pain and exhaustion without adapting, you are being like iron. And like iron under too much force, you are starting to break. They sat in silence as full darkness settled around them. The wind continued to move through the bamboo, and Ren watched the endless dance of bending and returning, yielding and rising. There was something almost hypnotic about it, something that spoke to a wisdom deeper than words. There is a story, the master said, about two teachers who lived in a mountain village. One was known for his incredible strength and discipline. He would fast for days, would meditate through the coldest nights without moving, would carry burdens that other men needed 3 people to lift. He was like iron, hard and unyielding. His students admired his power and tried to emulate his unbreakable nature. The other teacher seemed softer, more ordinary. He ate when he was hungry, rested when he was tired, asked for help when a burden was too heavy. Some people thought he was weak compared to the first teacher. His students sometimes wondered if they had chosen the wrong master. One winter, the harshest in living memory, came to the mountains. Snow fell for weeks without stopping. Food became scarce. The cold was brutal, relentless. The entire village struggled to survive. The first teacher continued his practices unchanged. He maintained his fasting schedule even as food grew scarce. He meditated outdoors through the freezing nights. He refused to acknowledge the severity of the conditions, believing that true strength meant never adapting, never yielding to circumstances. His body could not sustain this. The extreme conditions combined with his refusal to adapt broke him. He fell seriously ill. His iron strength, when it finally gave way, shattered completely. He survived the winter, but his health never fully recovered. His unbreakable approach had, in the end, broken him. The second teacher adapted to the winter. He ate smaller meals more frequently to conserve energy. He meditated indoors where it was warmer. He accepted help from others and offered help in return. He bent with the conditions without abandoning his practice. He was like bamboo in a storm, yielding to reality while maintaining his core integrity. When spring came, the second teacher was healthy and whole. He had not compromised his principles, but he had adapted his methods. He had been flexible enough to meet the conditions as they were, not as he wished them to be. His students finally understood what they had been learning. True strength is not rigid resistance to all conditions. True strength is the wisdom to know when to stand firm and when to bend, when to push through and when to rest, when to persist and when to adapt. Ren listened to this story while watching the bamboo continue its graceful movement in the wind. He could feel the teaching settling into his aching body, into his exhausted muscles, into the rigidity he had been holding. "I've been trying to be the first teacher," Ren said quietly. Pushing through everything, refusing to acknowledge when something is too much, thinking that any kind of yielding is weakness. "Yes. And what is your body telling you?" "That I'm breaking. That this approach isn't working." Your body is wise. It knows what the bamboo knows. There is a time to exert force and a time to yield. There is a time to work intensely and a time to rest. There is a time to bear a heavy load and a time to ask for help. Knowing which is which, adapting to what each moment requires, this is true strength. The master stood slowly. "Come, let's walk back. But walk slowly. Let your body move naturally. Don't force yourself to stand straight. Let yourself bend if you need to, like the bamboo bends. There is no shame in this. There is only wisdom." As they walked back through the dark monastery grounds, Ren noticed something. When he stopped forcing his body to be rigid, when he allowed himself to move with his pain instead of against it, movement became easier. Not painless, but easier. His body knew how to protect itself, how to move in ways that didn't aggravate the injury, but only when he stopped forcing it into rigid positions. The next morning, Ren approached the work site differently. When a heavy beam needed to be moved, instead of trying to lift it alone to prove his strength, he asked another monk to help. Together, they moved it easily. When his back began to ache, instead of pushing through, he switched to a different task that didn't strain the same muscles. He was still working, still contributing, but adapting his effort to what his body could actually handle. The elder monk noticed this and approached. "You're avoiding the heavy work." Ren took a breath, expecting criticism. But instead of defending himself or making excuses, he simply spoke honestly. "My back is injured. I'm working in ways that allow healing while still being useful. Like bamboo bending in wind, not breaking." The elder monk looked at him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, his expression softened. "I've had 3 serious back injuries in my life from refusing to bend. Each one took longer to heal than the last. Perhaps the bamboo knows something I didn't learn soon enough." He walked away, leaving Ren standing there surprised. Even the elder monk, with all his talk of being like iron, had learned the cost of rigidity. Over the following days, Ren discovered that flexibility did not mean weakness. When he worked with his body's reality instead of against it, he could work longer without exhaustion. When he asked for help with tasks that were too heavy, he could offer help to others in return, and the work flowed more smoothly for everyone. He noticed this principle extending beyond physical work. In conversations, when someone challenged his ideas, instead of rigidly defending his position, he could consider what they were saying. Sometimes he learned something new. Sometimes he changed his mind. This wasn't weakness. It was the flexibility to bend toward truth wherever it came from. In meditation, when difficult emotions arose, instead of trying to be stronger than them, to push them away through sheer force of will, he could bend with them. Let them move through without resistance, then return to his center when they passed, like bamboo in wind, bending but not breaking, returning to upright when the gust passed. One morning about 2 weeks after the teaching at the bamboo grove, Ren woke to find heavy snow falling. The kind of storm that would test everyone's strength. His first impulse was the old one: brace yourself. Be hard. Be unbreakable. But then he remembered the bamboo. He got up slowly, letting his body wake naturally. He dressed warmly instead of trying to prove he could endure cold. He ate a good breakfast instead of fasting to show discipline. When he went outside to help clear snow, he worked steadily but not frantically. When he got tired, he rested briefly rather than pushing to exhaustion. When the wind picked up and made the work harder, he waited for it to ease rather than battling directly against it. By the end of the day, he had accomplished more than usual. Not through force, but through sustainability. Not through rigid determination, but through flexible persistence. That evening, as the snow continued to fall, Ren returned to the bamboo grove. The stalks were covered in snow, their leaves weighed down with white. As he watched, the wind picked up again, and something remarkable happened. The bamboo bent under the weight of snow and the force of wind. It bent so far that the snow slid off the leaves and branches. By yielding to the wind, by bending low, the bamboo shed the weight that might have broken it. Then it straightened again, lighter and free. The master appeared beside him, also watching. "See that?" The bamboo does not hold on to burdens that will break it. It bends, releases what it cannot carry, and rises again. I've been holding on to so much, Ren said. Trying to carry everything without bending, without releasing anything, thinking that asking for help or admitting struggle was weakness. And now I see that the strongest thing is still standing at the end of the storm. Not the thing that never bent, but the thing that bent and returned again and again. They stood together in the falling snow, watching the bamboo's endless dance of yielding and returning. Each time the wind came, the bamboo bowed. Each time the wind passed, the bamboo rose. It never fought the wind, but the wind never destroyed it. This is one of nature's deepest teachings, the master said. Flexibility is not the opposite of strength. It is strength's highest form. The water that wears away stone is not hard. The wind that shapes mountains is not solid. The bamboo that survives the harshest storms is not rigid. The universe itself teaches this. Seasons change, weather shifts, life moves in cycles. Everything in nature knows how to adapt, how to yield, how to bend and return. Only humans get confused, thinking that strength means never changing, never adapting, never bending. Winter deepened around the monastery. More storms came, each one testing everyone's endurance. But Ren moved through them differently. Now when the work was hard, he worked hard but within his capacity. When rest was needed, he rested without guilt. When help was needed, he asked for it and offered it. His back healed slowly, but it did heal. The rigidity in his shoulders eased. His hands, which had been clenched so tightly around tools, learned to hold firmly but not desperately. He noticed that his meditation practice deepened, too. By learning flexibility in his body, he learned flexibility in his mind. Thoughts and feelings could arise without him having to be stronger than them, without him having to fight them off through rigid control. He could bend with them, let them move through, and return to his center. One afternoon, during a particularly harsh storm, Ren was in the meditation hall when he heard a loud crack from outside. He went to investigate and found that one of the old pine trees near the monastery gate had broken. A massive branch, as thick as a man's torso, had snapped under the weight of ice and wind. It lay on the ground, leaving a jagged wound in the tree. The master was already there, looking at the fallen branch. Other monks gathered around, discussing how to clear it away. The pine refused to bend, the master said quietly to Ren. See how rigid its wood is. Strong, yes, but not flexible. When the weight became too much, it had no choice but to break. They walked together to the bamboo grove nearby. The bamboo was buried under snow and ice, the stalks bent almost completely horizontal under the weight. Some of them touched the ground, arched over like green bridges. Look at this, the master said. The bamboo carries as much weight as the pine branch did, maybe more. But see how it responds. As they watched, the wind shifted slightly, and one of the bamboo stalks moved just enough that the snow slid off. Freed from the weight, the stalk sprang partway upright, though still bent from the remaining snow. Gradually, as more snow fell or shifted, more stalks began to release their burdens and rise. The bamboo knows something the pine does not, the master said. It knows that you do not have to carry every burden to its breaking point. You can bend, release what is too heavy, and return. The pine tried to hold everything until it could hold no more, and then it broke. Ren thought about his own life. How often had he been like the pine branch, holding on to everything, carrying every burden, refusing to bend or release anything until finally something broke. His back had been like that branch, holding rigid under too much weight until it gave way. Teacher, how do we know when to bend? How do we know when we're carrying too much? Your body tells you. Your mind tells you. But you have to listen. The pine branch had signals, small cracks and strains that appeared days before it broke. But a tree cannot respond to these signals. It has no choice but to hold until it breaks. You have a choice. You can feel when the weight is becoming too much, and you can choose to bend, to release some of the burden, before you break. The master led Ren back to the broken pine. There is something else to learn here. Look at the tree itself. Ren looked at the trunk. Despite the broken branch, the tree stood strong. The wound where the branch had torn away was ugly and raw, but the tree still lived. Sometimes, the master said, we hold rigid for so long that something does break. This is not the end. The tree will heal. The wound will close over time. New branches will grow. But healing takes longer than bending would have taken. And the scar remains. When you injured your back, this was like the branch breaking. It happened because you held rigid too long. But you are healing now. And you carry the lesson in your body. The scar, when it fully heals, will be a teacher. It will remind you to bend before breaking. They stood in silence, watching snow continue to fall on the damaged tree and the flexible bamboo. Two different approaches to the same storm. One had broken and would heal. The other bent and remained whole. I don't want to break again, Ren said. Then practice being like bamboo. Not just in your body, but in everything. In your expectations, in your relationships, in your practice. Hold your center, but let the surface adapt. Be strong in your principles, but flexible in your methods. Know what is essential and what can be released. The teaching of the bamboo wove through everything. In work and rest, in strength and yielding, in standing firm and adapting, there was a wisdom that came from watching how nature itself moved. A few days later, Ren faced a different kind of test. He had been working carefully on a wooden carving for the monastery shrine, spending hours shaping a piece of cedar. But near the end, his tool slipped and cut deeply into the wrong place, ruining the design. His first response was familiar: frustration, anger at himself, the rigid determination to be perfect. But then he remembered the bamboo. This mistake was like wind pushing against him. He could hold rigid in his anger and frustration, or he could bend with the reality of what had happened. He took a breath and looked at the damaged carving again. The mistake had created a different shape. Not the one he had planned, but perhaps something else was possible. Instead of forcing the wood back to his original vision, he adapted. He worked with the new form that the mistake had created. The final carving was different from what he had intended, but it had a natural quality, a sense of spontaneity that his careful planning might not have achieved. The mistake, met with flexibility rather than rigidity, had become a teacher. He thought about what the master had said about the bamboo releasing burdens. He had released his rigid attachment to the original plan, and something new had emerged. This was another way of bending. Not just in body, but in expectations, in attachment to outcomes, in the tight grip of control. As winter began to ease toward spring, Ren noticed the bamboo grove changing. The snow melted, the weight lifted, and the stalks straightened. Some of them bore marks from the winter, small scars where ice had damaged leaves, or where they had bent so far that the fibers showed stress. But they had survived. They stood green and whole, ready for another season. The broken pine branch had been cleared away. The tree showed new growth around its wound, slowly healing the damage. Both the bamboo and the pine would continue, but one had passed through winter by bending, the other by eventually breaking. Both were lessons. Both were teachers. Ren sat one evening in the bamboo grove, watching the stalks move in the early spring wind. Gentler wind now, not the harsh winter gales. The bamboo swayed easily, gracefully, its movement almost like a dance. He realized that the bamboo was not just bending away from force. It was also bending toward sun, toward water, toward the nutrients it needed. Flexibility was not just about avoiding damage. It was also about reaching toward what gives life. This felt important. He had learned to bend away from harm, to yield before breaking. But he could also learn to bend toward nourishment, toward truth, toward what helped him grow. Flexibility worked both ways. The bamboo never worried about being too flexible. It never tried to prove its strength by refusing to bend. It simply responded to each moment with its own nature, bending when the wind came, rising when the wind passed, reaching toward sunlight, drinking rain when it fell. This was enough. This was everything. Take a gentle breath now. Feel your body in this moment. Notice if there is any rigidity anywhere. Not to judge it, but simply to notice. What would it feel like to soften just slightly, to allow a little more flexibility? Let yourself rest now in this understanding. Let any rigidity you've been holding soften just a little. You don't need to be unbreakable. You need to be flexible enough to bend and return. The bamboo has been teaching this lesson for millions of years, standing through countless storms, yielding and rising again and again and again. Spring had fully arrived at the monastery. The snow had melted from all but the highest peaks, and green had returned to the mountain slopes. Flowers bloomed in the gardens, and birds filled the morning air with song. It was a season of renewal, of beginning again. But Ren found himself troubled by thoughts that would not leave him alone. A conversation from weeks ago kept replaying in his mind. He had spoken carelessly to another monk, and though they had resolved the matter, his mind kept returning to it. Over and over, the same words, the same embarrassment, the same wish that he had handled it differently. And it was not just this one memory. Other thoughts circled through his mind like birds that would not land, worries about his practice, questions about his progress, doubts about whether he was truly learning anything or just going through motions. Each thought would arrive, occupy his attention, and then another would come to replace it. During meditation, instead of finding peace, he found himself caught in these mental loops. The same thoughts returning again and again, as if his mind were a wheel turning through the same grooves. He would push one thought away, and it would return minutes later. He would try to focus on his breath and find himself lost in thought moments after. It was exhausting. His mind felt crowded, noisy, restless. And the harder he tried to quiet it, the louder it seemed to become. One morning, after a particularly difficult meditation, Ren found the master sweeping the path outside the meditation hall. "Teacher, my mind will not be still. The same thoughts keep returning, no matter how hard I try to let them go. It feels like I'm making no progress at all. Like everything I've learned has disappeared." The master continued sweeping, his movement steady and rhythmic. "Look up," he said simply. Ren looked up at the sky. It was a beautiful morning, the blue deep and clear. But clouds were moving across it, white and gray, some wispy and thin, others full and thick. "What do you see?" "Clouds moving across the sky." "Watch them for a moment." Ren stood still, watching. A large cloud drifted overhead, its shape clearly defined. He watched it move slowly across his field of vision. As he observed, the cloud began to change. Its edges became less sharp. Parts of it seemed to dissolve into the blue. Within a few minutes, the distinct shape had transformed into something else entirely, and then into wisps that gradually faded until he could barely tell where the cloud ended and the sky began. "Where did the cloud go?" the master asked. "It dissolved. It's gone." "And did you have to do anything to make it dissolve?" "No, it happened by itself." The master leaned the broom against the wall. "Come with me. Let's watch the clouds for a while." They walked to an open area on the monastery grounds where the view of the sky was wide and unobstructed. The master sat on the grass, and Ren joined him. Together they lay back, looking up at the vast expanse above them. Clouds moved steadily across their vision. Some were small and quick, racing across the blue. Others were large and slow, taking several minutes to pass. Some were white and light, others gray and heavy-looking. Each one was different, and each one kept changing as it moved. "Your thoughts are like these clouds," the master said. "They appear in the sky of your awareness. They move across it. They change shape, and eventually they dissolve. You do not make them appear, and you do not make them disappear. They come and go by themselves." Ren watched a particularly large cloud drift overhead. "But my thoughts feel more solid than clouds. They feel heavy and persistent. The same ones keep coming back. Look at that large gray cloud there. Does it look solid to you?" "Yes. It looks heavy and thick. And yet it is made of nothing but water vapor and air. If you could pass through it, your hand would find nothing solid at all. The appearance of solidity is an illusion. The cloud has no more substance than the air around it. It only appears dense and heavy. The master pointed to another cloud. That one looks like it will stay in the sky forever. But watch it. They watched in silence. Slowly, the cloud's edges began to blur. Parts of it thinned and faded. Within 10 minutes, the cloud that had looked so permanent had almost completely dissolved. Thoughts are the same, the master said. They appear solid and lasting, but they are made of nothing substantial. They are patterns of energy moving through awareness, no more solid than these clouds moving through the sky. And like clouds, they naturally dissolve when you stop trying to hold on to them or push them away. A dark cloud moved across the sun, and the light changed. Everything became dimmer, cooler. Shadows disappeared. The change was dramatic and immediate. When a thought comes that troubles you, the master said, it is like this cloud covering the sun. Everything seems darker. Your whole experience changes. But notice that the sun has not gone anywhere. It is still shining, still bright. It is only temporarily obscured. They lay quietly as the dark cloud continued across the sky. Gradually, its edge approached the sun. A rim of light appeared, then grew brighter. Suddenly, the cloud passed, and full sunlight returned. Everything brightened again, exactly as it had been before. The troubled thought is like the dark cloud. It covers the natural clarity of your mind temporarily, but the clarity has not gone anywhere. It is still there, shining steadily, just like the sun behind the cloud. When the thought passes, the clarity returns. Ren felt something ease in his chest as he watched the clouds continue their endless procession. So I don't have to fight the thoughts or push them away. No. Fighting them is like trying to push clouds out of the sky with your hands. It accomplishes nothing and exhausts you. The clouds will move in their own time. Your job is not to control the clouds. Your job is to remember the sky. The sky. The master gestured to the vast blue expanse above them. The sky holds all the clouds, but it is not affected by them. Clear clouds or dark clouds, many clouds or few, the sky remains the sky. It does not fight the clouds. It does not grasp them or push them away. It simply allows them to move through. Your awareness is like the sky. Thoughts are like clouds moving through it. The thoughts come and go, appear and dissolve, but your awareness remains. It is not disturbed by the thoughts any more than the sky is disturbed by clouds. They sat up, and the master pointed to the horizon where new clouds were forming. Watch how clouds are born. Ren looked at the horizon. He could see wisps of white beginning to gather, condensing from seemingly nothing into visible forms. The clouds grew and developed, taking on shape and substance where moments before there had been only clear blue. Thoughts appear the same way, the master said. They form from conditions. A memory, a sensation, a word someone speaks. Conditions come together, and a thought forms, just as water vapor and temperature come together and a cloud forms. The thought seems to come from nowhere, but it arises from causes, like everything else in nature. A story came to the master then, and they settled more comfortably on the grass. There was once a woman who lived near the sea. Every morning she would sit on the beach and watch the waves. Each wave was different. Some were small and gentle, others large and powerful. They would rise from the ocean, crest in white foam, and crash on the shore, then pull back into the sea. The woman loved the waves. She found them endlessly fascinating, each one unique and beautiful. But one day, a wave frightened her. It was larger than usual, and it crashed with a sound like thunder. The noise startled her, and her heart raced with fear. After that, she began to worry about the waves. What if another frightening one came? What if an even larger wave appeared? She started watching the ocean anxiously, bracing herself against each wave, tensing as they approached the shore. Her mornings, which had once been peaceful, became filled with tension and fear. She could not enjoy the gentle waves because she was always watching for the frightening one to return. And return it did. Not every day, but sometimes. Each time, her fear grew stronger. One morning, an old fisherman sat down beside her on the beach. He saw how she tensed with each wave, how she could not relax even when the ocean was calm. "Why do you fight the waves?" he asked. "I'm not fighting them," she said. "I'm protecting myself from them. By tensing against every wave. By living in fear of the ones that might be frightening. This is a kind of fighting." The woman did not understand. "What should I do instead? Just let a huge wave crash over me?" The fisherman smiled. "Tell me, what is a wave?" "A wave is water rising and falling." "Yes. And where does the wave come from?" "From the ocean." "And where does it go?" The woman thought about this. "Back into the ocean." "Exactly. The wave rises from the ocean, takes a form for a brief moment, and then returns to the ocean. It is not separate from the ocean. It is the ocean temporarily taking the form of a wave, and then the form dissolves, and there is only ocean again." He gestured to the water before them. "Your thoughts and feelings are like waves rising from the ocean of your awareness. They take form. They move through your experience, and then they dissolve back into awareness. They are not separate from you. They are not attacking you. They are movements within your own being. Like waves are movements within the ocean." The woman sat with this teaching, watching the waves with new understanding. A large wave rose and crashed, just as frightening in its sound and power as before. But this time, instead of bracing against it, she watched it. She saw it rise from the ocean, take its form, crash on the shore, and return to the ocean. It was powerful. It was intense. But it was also temporary. It was a wave, not the ocean itself. And she was the ocean, not the wave. From that day, her relationship with the waves changed. She could watch the large, frightening ones without tensing against them. She could appreciate their power without being overcome by fear, because she understood that she was not the wave. She was the vast ocean from which all waves rose and to which all waves returned. Ren lay back on the grass again, looking at the clouds. "My recurring thoughts are like waves I keep tensing against, the embarrassing conversation, the doubts about my practice. They rise up, and I brace myself. I try to push them back down, but they keep returning. Yes. And what happens to the ocean when it fights its own waves? Ren thought about this. It would exhaust itself. The ocean cannot fight waves because waves are the ocean's own movement. Exactly. You cannot fight your thoughts because thoughts are your mind's own movement. They are not invaders. They are not enemies. They are natural phenomena arising from conditions, moving through awareness, and dissolving back into awareness. A bird flew across their field of vision, passing between them and the clouds above. For a moment it was clearly visible against the white, and then it flew into clear blue and became harder to see. "Notice that bird," the master said. "It moves through the sky just as the clouds do. But we do not call it a sky bird. We know it is separate from the sky, moving through it. But clouds are not separate from the sky. They are the sky taking temporary form. In the same way, thoughts are not separate from awareness. They are awareness taking temporary form. So when I identify with a thought, when I think I am this anxiety or I am this doubt, I'm making a mistake. You are forgetting the sky. You are identifying with the cloud instead of recognizing yourself as the vast space in which clouds appear. The cloud is real, but it is not what you are. You are what holds the cloud, not the cloud itself." They stood and began walking back toward the monastery. Above them, clouds continued their constant movement, new ones forming, old ones dissolving, some changing shape so gradually it was hard to see, others transforming quickly from one form to another. "This is why meditation is sometimes called sky practice," the master said. "You learn to rest as the sky while clouds of thought move through. Some days there are many clouds, some days few. Some days the clouds are dark and heavy, some days light and wispy. But the sky remains the sky through all conditions. When you sit in meditation and thoughts come, you are not failing at meditation. The sky is not failing at being sky when clouds appear. Thoughts appearing in awareness is as natural as clouds appearing in sky. The practice is to remain as the sky, spacious and allowing, while the weather of your mind moves through." They reached the meditation hall. The master paused before entering. "Try this tonight. When you meditate, do not try to stop thoughts or push them away. Instead, practice being the sky. Notice when a thought appears, like noticing a cloud. Watch it move through. See how it changes. Observe when it begins to dissolve. And keep noticing the space in which all of this is happening. The space, the awareness that holds everything, the sky behind all the clouds. That which is aware of the thoughts but is not the thoughts themselves." That evening, Ren sat for meditation with this new understanding. At first, his mind was as busy as ever. The familiar recurring thoughts appeared, the embarrassing conversation, the doubts about his practice, worries about tomorrow. But instead of fighting them or being caught by them, he tried to watch them like clouds. This thought about the conversation appeared. It moved across his awareness. It began to change. Other details emerged, the emphasis shifting. And then, as he simply watched without engaging, it began to fade. Another thought arose to replace it, as new clouds form when old ones dissolve. A worry about his meditation not being good enough. He watched this thought too. Noticed its shape, its quality, saw how it created a feeling in his body, a tightness in his chest. And as he watched without grasping or pushing away, this thought too began to dissolve. It was not that the thoughts stopped coming. They continued to arise. But there was a difference now. He was not in the thoughts. He was watching them move through awareness, like standing on a mountain and watching clouds move through the valley below. Sometimes he forgot and got caught in a thought, identifying with it completely. But then he would remember, oh, this is a cloud. I am the sky. And in that remembering, he would find space again, find that clear awareness that held everything without being disturbed by anything. The practice continued over the following days. Ren found himself naturally watching his mind the way he had watched the clouds. Thoughts would arise, and instead of immediately believing them or fighting them, he would notice, here is a thought about the past. Here is a worry about the future. Here is a judgment about how things should be. And he noticed something remarkable. When he stopped trying to control his thoughts, they became less persistent. The recurring thoughts that had plagued him began to appear less frequently, not because he was pushing them away, but because he was not feeding them with his attention and struggle. It was like the clouds. When he had tried to push a cloud away, it seemed to linger. But when he simply watched clouds without grasping or resisting, they dissolved naturally in their own time. One afternoon he was working in the garden when the thought about his embarrassing conversation arose again. His first instinct was the familiar one, tense against it, wish it away, feel ashamed all over again. But then he remembered the clouds. He paused in his work, feeling the thought in his awareness. It was there, clear and distinct, like a cloud in a clear sky. He did not try to push it away. He did not get lost in it either. He simply let it be there. Let it move through like a cloud passing overhead. And something shifted. The thought was still there, but the suffering around it was less. He could acknowledge the memory without being consumed by it. It was a thought, not his identity. It was a cloud, not the sky. The thought remained for a few more moments, then began to fade. Other thoughts arose. He returned to his gardening, and the thoughts continued their natural movement, appearing and dissolving while he remained present with the work in front of him. A week after the cloud teaching, a heavy storm rolled in over the mountains. Dark clouds filled the sky completely, blocking out the sun. Rain fell steadily, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Ren stood under the shelter of a covered walkway, watching the storm. The master joined him, also watching the rainfall. Notice, the master said, even on a day like this, the sky is still there. Behind all these storm clouds, beyond all this darkness, the sky remains unchanged. The sun is still shining above the clouds. But from down here, we cannot see it. This is like difficult times in your life. Times when your mind is filled with dark thoughts. When everything seems cloudy and heavy. In those times, it is easy to forget the sky. Easy to believe that the darkness is all there is. But the clear awareness is still there, unchanged, like the sky behind the storm. Thunder rolled across the valley. The rain intensified. Even in the darkest times, even when you cannot feel or see your own clarity, it has not gone anywhere. It is simply obscured by weather passing through. The storm is real. The darkness is real. But it is temporary, and it is not what you fundamentally are. They stood in silence watching the storm. And then, after about 20 minutes, Ren noticed something. A lighter patch appeared in the clouds. The rain began to ease. The darkness started to lift. Within an hour, breaks appeared in the clouds, and sunlight streamed through in brilliant shafts. The storm passed, as all storms do. The sky remained. Ren's meditation practice deepened with this understanding. He no longer judged his meditation sessions as good or bad based on how many thoughts appeared. Some sits had many thoughts, like a cloudy day. Some had fewer thoughts, like a clear day. But he was learning to rest as the sky in both conditions. The recurring thoughts that had troubled him so much began to lose their power. They still appeared sometimes, but they no longer dominated his experience. They were like familiar clouds passing through, recognized but not feared, acknowledged but not believed to be solid or lasting. He noticed this principle extending beyond meditation into his whole day. Emotions would arise like weather patterns. Sometimes he would feel happy, like a sunny day. Sometimes irritated or sad, like cloudy weather. But underneath the changing emotional weather, there was something that remained constant, the awareness that held all experiences, disturbed by none of them. This was deeply restful, not because difficult thoughts and feelings stopped coming, but because he no longer had to fight them or fix them. He could let them move through like clouds across the sky, natural phenomena arising and dissolving according to their own nature. One clear evening, as the sun set and the first stars appeared, Ren sat outside watching the sky darken. A few clouds drifted past, turning pink and orange in the sunset light, then fading to gray as night came on. The master sat down beside him. "What do you see now?" "I see clouds disappearing into darkness. But I know they're still there, even though I can't see them anymore." "Yes. At night, clouds become invisible, but they are still present, still moving through the sky. In the same way, even when you are not consciously watching your thoughts, they are still arising and dissolving. The sky of awareness continues, whether you are paying attention to it or not." The stars grew brighter as the sky darkened completely. The clouds were no longer visible, but Ren could sense their presence. Occasionally a star would disappear briefly as a cloud passed in front of it, then reappear when the cloud moved on. "This is the ultimate teaching of the clouds," the master said. "Whether you watch them or not, whether you know they are there or not, clouds continue their natural movement, arising, changing, dissolving. You do not need to manage this process. You do not need to control it. You only need to remember what you are. Not the clouds, but the sky. Not the thoughts, but the awareness in which thoughts appear. And when you forget, then you remember again. Like the sun reappearing after a storm. The forgetting is natural, human. The remembering is the practice. Again and again, returning to the sky, to the awareness that holds everything without being changed by anything. Take a gentle breath now. Notice the thoughts moving through your awareness in this moment. They are there, like clouds across the sky. You do not need to push them away. You do not need to follow them. Simply notice them passing. The sky is always here. The awareness is always present. Even when you forget it, even when clouds fill your vision completely, the sky remains vast and clear and unchanged. This is what you are. This is what you have always been. The clouds cannot change this truth any more than weather can change the sky. Summer had settled over the monastery with its long, bright days and warm nights. The gardens were in full bloom. The work was steady but not overwhelming, and the community moved through its rhythms with practiced ease. Ren had grown in his practice. He could feel it in how he moved through each day, in the space that had opened up inside him. But lately, a new kind of difficulty had emerged. Not from external demands or internal struggle, but from a feeling of being compressed, crowded, overwhelmed by the sheer amount of everything. So many tasks to remember, so many responsibilities to track, so many interactions to navigate. Even his mind, though less troubled by sticky thoughts than before, felt full, packed with information, obligations, concerns both important and trivial. He felt like a storage room crammed with too many items. Everything had its place. Everything was managed. But there was no room left for anything new, no space to breathe, no emptiness in which something unexpected might arise. One morning after work assignments were given, Ren felt the pressure of this fullness acutely. His day was scheduled completely. Morning work, then study, then afternoon tasks, then evening practice. Every hour accounted for, every moment filled with something that needed to be done or attended to or remembered. He sat on a bench outside the meditation hall, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on him. Not in a way that was painful exactly, but in a way that felt stifling, like there was no room left for life to simply unfold. The master found him there, sitting with his shoulders slightly hunched, his eyes fixed on the ground. "You look compressed," the master observed, sitting down beside him. "That's exactly how I feel. Like everything is pressing in, and there's no space left. My mind is full. My schedule is full. Even my body feels full of tension. I can manage it all, but there's no room left for anything else. No room to just be." The master was quiet for a moment, then said, "Look up." Ren lifted his head and looked up. Above them stretched the sky, vast and open. It was a perfectly clear morning. Not a single cloud visible anywhere. Just endless blue extending in all directions from horizon to horizon. "What do you see?" "The sky. It's empty today." "Clear." "Empty," the master repeated. "And how much room is there in that emptiness?" Ren looked up again, trying to measure the vastness with his eyes. "Infinite room. Endless space. Yes. Come with me. Let's spend some time with the empty sky." They walked to the highest point on the monastery grounds, a small rocky outcrop that offered an unobstructed view in all directions. Here the sky seemed even more immense, pressing down from above and extending out to every horizon without interruption. The master sat on the rock, and Ren joined him. Together they looked up into the blue vastness. This emptiness, the master said, is not nothing. It is not absence. It is space itself. Pure potential. Room for everything. Ren looked at the boundless blue. But sky is just air, isn't it? Just empty space where nothing is. Is it empty? Right now, birds are flying through it. Wind is moving through it. Light from the sun travels through it. Sound moves through it. Everything that happens between earth and stars happens in this so-called emptiness. The sky holds everything without being crowded by anything. A bird appeared in the distance, flying across their field of vision. It moved through the vast blue, a tiny speck against the immensity. Then it was gone, and the sky remained exactly as it had been, undiminished by the bird's passage, unchanged by its presence or absence. Notice how the sky holds that bird, the master said. The bird does not crowd the sky. The sky does not need to make room for the bird. There is already infinite room. The bird simply appears in that space, moves through it, and disappears. And the sky is never too full. Now imagine, the master continued, 1,000 birds filling the sky. A whole flock moving through at once. Would the sky be crowded? Ren thought about this. No. Even with 1,000 birds, or 10,000, the sky would still have room. Exactly. The sky's capacity is not diminished by how much it holds. This is the nature of true emptiness. It is not empty because nothing is in it. It is empty because it has room for everything, and that room never runs out. They sat in silence, looking up. Ren tried to feel the spaciousness of the sky. Tried to sense what it would be like to have that kind of room inside himself. Your mind is like the sky, the master said. It has this same infinite capacity. But you have forgotten this. You experience your mind as full because you are holding on to everything that passes through it. Imagine if the sky tried to hold on to every bird that flew through it, every cloud that formed in it, every ray of light that traveled through it. There would be no room left. The sky would feel crowded and compressed. But the sky does not hold on to anything. It allows everything to pass through. And because it allows everything to pass through, it is never full. It is always empty, always spacious, always ready for whatever comes next. Ren felt something shift in his understanding. I'm trying to hold on to everything, every task, every obligation, every bit of information. Even when something is finished, I'm still carrying it. Yes. And this creates the experience of fullness, of being crowded. But if you could release what has passed, the way the sky releases the bird that has flown through it, there would be space again. Constant, renewable space. The master pointed to the horizon. See how the sky meets the earth. The sky goes on beyond what we can see. In the same way, your awareness extends beyond what you can directly perceive. The spaciousness is always there, whether you feel it or not. The question is whether you are resting in that spaciousness or trying to fill it up and hold on to everything. A story came to the master's mind, and he settled more comfortably on the rock. There was once a potter who lived in a small village. She was known for making beautiful vessels, pots and bowls and vases that were both functional and lovely. People would come from distant towns to buy her work. One day, a wealthy merchant visited her workshop. He saw shelf after shelf of finished pottery, each piece carefully made and beautifully glazed. But he noticed something odd. In the very center of the workshop, raised on a special platform, sat a single clay vessel. It was unlike any of her other work. It was perfectly round, smooth, and simple, with no decoration at all. And it appeared to be completely empty. "What is this piece?" the merchant asked. "It seems to hold a place of honor, but it's so plain, and it's empty. Why do you display an empty pot?" The potter smiled. "That is not an empty pot. That is the most important piece in my workshop." "But there's nothing in it," the merchant protested. "Exactly," said the potter. "Tell me, what makes a pot useful?" The merchant thought about this. "The clay, I suppose. The craftsmanship. The beauty of its form. Those things make it admirable," the potter agreed. "But what makes it useful?" The merchant looked confused. "A pot is useful," the potter explained, "because of the emptiness inside it. The clay creates a boundary, a shape. But the function of a pot comes from the space within. Without that empty space, you cannot put water in it. You cannot store grain in it. You cannot use it for anything at all. The emptiness is not the absence of usefulness. The emptiness is the usefulness itself." She picked up the simple vessel from its platform and held it out. "This pot reminds me of the most important thing in my work. I shape the clay, yes. But what I'm really creating is the emptiness inside. The space that can hold things. Without that space, all my craft and skill would be meaningless." The merchant looked at the pot with new understanding. "I've always thought of emptiness as nothing, as lack. But you're saying it's actually capacity." "Yes. Emptiness is not poverty. It is possibility. It is room. It is the space in which things can exist and be held." The merchant bought several of the potter's vessels that day, but he kept thinking about the simple empty pot on the platform. A few weeks later, he returned. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told the potter, "about emptiness being capacity. And I've noticed something about my own life. I keep filling it with more and more things, more possessions, more activities, more obligations. I thought that's what would make me happy, to have a full life. But instead, I feel crowded and anxious, like there's no room for me in my own life anymore." The potter nodded. "You are like a pot that is already completely full. When something new wants to enter your life, when an opportunity appears or a moment of joy arises, there is no room for it. You have filled all the space with what you've accumulated. So what should I do? Get rid of everything? Not necessarily. But perhaps create some emptiness. some space. Some room for the unexpected, the spontaneous, the new. A pot must have empty space to be useful. A life must have empty space to be lived. The merchant took this teaching to heart. He began to create spaces of emptiness in his days. Mornings where nothing was scheduled. Rooms in his house that contained only space, no furniture or possessions. Times when he would simply sit and allow whatever wanted to arise, without forcing or filling. At first, the emptiness felt uncomfortable. He was so used to fullness that space felt like something wrong, something that needed to be fixed. But gradually, he began to appreciate the emptiness itself. The way it allowed for spontaneity, for rest, for things to emerge that could never appear in a crowded life. He realized that the potter had taught him something profound. The value is not in how much you can accumulate and hold. The value is in how much space you can maintain for life itself to flow through. Ren listened to this story while looking up at the vast empty sky. He could feel how his own life had become like an overfilled pot. Every moment accounted for, every hour claimed by some task or obligation. There was no empty space left for anything unexpected to arise. Teacher, I understand the teaching. But practically, how do I create this emptiness? My responsibilities are real. The tasks need to be done. I can't just abandon everything. The potter did not abandon her craft, the master said. She still made pots, still filled her workshop with work. But she maintained an empty space at the center. She remembered what made everything else possible. In your own life, you do not need to abandon your responsibilities. But you can stop trying to hold on to everything that has already passed. When a task is complete, let it go completely instead of carrying it forward in your mind. When a moment has finished, release it rather than adding it to the pile of accumulated moments you're storing. The master gestured to the sky. The sky does not become less spacious by allowing things to pass through it. Your mind does not become less capable by releasing what has already happened. In fact, it becomes more capable because there is space for what is actually present. They sat in silence for a long time, just being with the vast empty sky. Ren tried to feel into that quality of spaciousness. What would it be like to have that much room inside, to not feel compressed and crowded, but open and available? As he sat, he began to notice something. His breathing had more space in it. Instead of quick, shallow breaths, there was room for deeper, slower breathing. And with that, his chest felt less tight. His shoulders dropped slightly. The physical sensation of compression began to ease. You're discovering something, the master observed. When I stopped trying to hold everything, when I let my attention rest in the space rather than in all the things filling the space, there's actual physical relief. My body feels less compressed. Yes. The body and mind are not separate. When the mind feels crowded, the body contracts. When you remember the spaciousness, the body can expand again. This is why the sky is such an important teacher. It shows you what is always available. Not by adding something, but by recognizing the space that was already there. The master pointed to Ren's chest. Right now, inside your body, there is space. Between every cell, around every organ, there is emptiness. Your body is not solid. It is mostly space. And it is that space that allows everything to function. The heart has room to beat. The lungs have room to expand. Blood has room to flow. Life happens in the spaces, not in the solid parts. Ren put his hand on his chest, trying to feel this space inside himself. And he could sense it, not as an absence, but as a presence. The space in which his heart beat, in which his breath moved, in which life itself flowed. This emptiness inside you, the Master continued, is not different from the emptiness of the sky. It is the same space, the same capacity, the same infinite room for whatever needs to arise. A wind picked up, moving across the rocky outcrop where they sat. Ren felt it touch his face, move through his hair, flow past his body. The wind was invisible, but he could feel its presence clearly. The wind moves through the empty sky, the Master said. If the sky were full, there would be no room for wind. But because the sky is empty, the wind can move freely. In the same way, when you maintain emptiness in your awareness, life can move through you freely. Inspiration can arise. Intuition can speak. Spontaneity can emerge. But only if there is room. They stood and began walking back toward the monastery. As they walked, Ren kept looking up at the sky, kept feeling its vastness above him. Teacher, will I forget this? When I return to my full schedule, when all the tasks and obligations press in again, will I lose this feeling of spaciousness? Yes, probably. But then you will remember again. The sky is always there. You can look up any time and be reminded. And gradually, you will learn to maintain the awareness of spaciousness even when you are busy. Not by doing less, but by releasing what has passed and staying present with what is. That afternoon, Ren went about his tasks with a different quality. When he finished one job, instead of immediately carrying it forward in his mind while starting the next, he paused just for a moment. A tiny space between tasks. In that space, he could feel the emptiness, the room, the capacity for the next thing to arise fresh. It was subtle, but it changed everything. Each task felt less like another item being added to an already overfull container. Each moment felt more like something arising in vast space and then dissolving back into that space when it was complete. During evening meditation, Ren sat with an awareness of the empty space, not trying to create it, but recognizing it was already there. The space in which thoughts arose, the space in which sensations appeared, the space in which his entire experience was happening. Thoughts still came, but they seemed less substantial, less solid. They were like birds flying through the sky, present for a moment, and then gone, leaving the space unchanged. A memory arose of something he had said wrong earlier in the day. Usually he would grasp this memory, hold it, turn it over and over in his mind. But now he watched it appear in the space of awareness, watched it exist for a moment, and then watched it dissolve back into space. It came and went, and the space remained. This was deeply restful. Not because nothing was happening, but because he was not trying to hold on to everything that happened. There was room for experience to arise and pass endlessly, without ever becoming crowded. Over the following days, Ren practiced maintaining this awareness of spaciousness. It was not always easy. His habit of filling every moment, of holding on to everything, was strong. But each time he remembered to look up at the sky, each time he paused between tasks, he could feel the space again. He began to notice spaciousness in other places, too. The silence between sounds. The pause between breaths. The gap between one thought ending and another beginning. These tiny spaces had always been there, but he had never paid attention to them. Now he saw that these spaces were not empty nothingness. They were the very ground in which everything else arose. One morning he woke before dawn and went outside. The sky was still dark, filled with stars. He lay on his back in the grass and looked up. The stars seemed infinitely distant, separated by vast reaches of black space. But it was the space between the stars that allowed him to see the stars at all. Without that darkness, without that emptiness, the stars would be invisible. The Master appeared and lay down beside him. Beautiful, isn't it? I never appreciated the empty space before, Ren said. I only looked at the stars. But now I can see that the emptiness is just as important, maybe more important. In art, the Master said, this is called negative space. The empty areas that define and give meaning to the filled areas. A painting is not just the brush strokes. It is also the empty canvas showing through. A piece of music is not just the notes. It is also the silence between the notes. The emptiness is not the absence of the thing. It is what allows the thing to exist and be perceived. In your life, the emptiness is not the absence of living. It is what allows life to happen. Without space, there is no room for anything new to emerge. Without pauses, there is no room for rest or reflection. Without silence, there is no room for listening or understanding. As the sky began to lighten with approaching dawn, they sat up and watched the transformation. The stars faded one by one, not because they stopped existing, but because the growing light made them invisible. The darkness that had made them visible was replaced by the blue brightness of day. The emptiness takes different forms, the Master said. Sometimes it appears as darkness, like the night sky. Sometimes as brightness, like the blue day sky. But in both cases, it is the same essential space, the same infinite capacity to hold whatever arises. The sun rose, and the whole sky filled with color. Orange and pink and gold painted across the blue. But underneath all that color, the space remained. The vastness that could hold sunrise and sunset, storm and calm, day and night, without ever being diminished or crowded. This is what you are, the Master said quietly. Not the changing content, but the unchanging space. Not the thoughts and feelings and experiences that come and go, but the vast awareness in which all of that appears. The sky is not separate from you. It is showing you your own nature. Ren felt tears come to his eyes, though he could not say exactly why. Something about this teaching touched him deeply. All his life he had been trying to be something, to become someone, to fill himself with achievements and understanding and worthiness. But here was a teaching that said his true nature was not what he could accumulate, but the space itself. The emptiness that was already complete, already whole, already infinite. "I've been trying to prove my worth by how much I could hold," Ren said quietly. "How much I could accomplish, how much I could carry, how full I could make my life. But that was never what mattered." "No," the master agreed. "Your worth is not measured by fullness. It is inherent in the space itself. The sky is not valuable because of what fills it. It is valuable because of its infinite capacity to hold everything. You are the same." Ren looked up at the brightening sky, feeling something profound settling into understanding. All these teachings, the river and mountain, the moon and bamboo and clouds, they were all pointing to this, to the spacious awareness that held everything, that was disturbed by nothing, that had infinite room for whatever life brought. The emptiness was not cold or distant. It was intimate and immediate. It was the very space in which he existed, in which everything existed. And it was inexhaustible. And so our journey tonight comes to a gentle close. The teachings have been offered. Nature has spoken in many voices, each one revealing the same essential truth. The river taught about flowing rather than forcing, about finding your way through obstacles by yielding instead of resisting. The mountain showed the steadiness that remains beneath all changing conditions. The moon revealed the difference between what is real and what is merely reflection. The bamboo demonstrated that true strength comes through flexibility, not rigidity. The clouds showed how thoughts arise and dissolve in the vast sky of awareness. And the empty sky itself pointed to the infinite spaciousness that holds everything. These were not separate lessons but different views of the same wisdom. You are not what passes through. You are what remains. Not the weather but the sky. Not the wave but the ocean. Not the cloud but the space in which it appears. The river still flows, finding its path without struggle. The mountain still stands steady through every storm. The bamboo still bends in the wind, returning upright again and again. Above it all, the sky holds everything, vast and unchanging. Nature continues its endless teaching, available to anyone who pauses to observe. The wisdom is always here, speaking through water and stone, through wind and space, through every element of the world around us. Rest now in what you have received. These truths were never far from you. They live in your breath, in your body, in the awareness that holds these very words. The path was always here, leading not to somewhere else, but home to what you already are. The teachings have been given. The rest is simply living them, one moment at a time. As natural as water flowing downhill, as inevitable as seasons turning, as spacious as the empty sky. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Monk's Moon Temple.